1번.
When I was in high school, we had students who could study in the coffee shop and not get distracted by the noise or everything happening around them. We also had students who could not study if the library was not super quiet. The latter students suffered because even in the library, it was impossible to get the type of complete silence they sought. These students were victims of distractions who found it very difficult to study anywhere, except in their private bedrooms. In today's world, it is impossible to run away from distractions. Distractions are everywhere, but if you want to achieve your goals, you must learn how to tackle distractions. You cannot eliminate distractions, but you can learn to live with them in a way that ensures they do not limit you.
2번.
FOBO, or fear of a better option, is the anxiety that something better will come along, which makes it undesirable to commit to existing choices when making a decision. It's an affliction of abundance that drives you to keep all of your options open and to avoid risks. Rather than assessing your options, choosing one, and moving on with your day, you delay the inevitable. It's not unlike hitting the snooze button on your alarm clock, only to pull the covers over your head and fall back asleep. As you probably found out the hard way, if you hit snooze enough times, you'll end up being late and racing for the office, your day and mood ruined. While pressing snooze feels so good at the moment, it ultimately demands a price.
3번.
The use of renewable sources of energy to produce electricity has increasingly been encouraged as a way to harmonize the need to secure electricity supply with environmental protection objectives. But the use of renewable sources also comes with its own consequences, which require consideration. Renewable sources of energy include a variety of sources, such as hydropower and ocean-based technologies. Additionally, solar, wind, geothermal and biomass. Renewable sources also have their own impact on the environment. Hydropower dams, for example, have an impact on aquatic ecosystems, and, more recently, have been identified as significant sources of greenhouse emissions. Wind, solar, and biomass also cause negative environmental impacts, such as visual pollution, intensive land occupation and negative effects on bird populations.
4번.
In their study in 2007, Catherine Kinsler and her colleagues at Harvard showed that our tendency to identify with an in-group to a large degree begins in infancy and may be innate. Kinsler and her team took a bunch of 5-month-olds, whose families only spoke English, and showed the babies 2 videos. In one video, a woman was speaking English. In the other, a woman was speaking Spanish. Then they were shown a screen with both women side by side, not speaking. In infant psychology research, the standard measure for affinity or interest is attention. Babies will apparently stare longer at the things they like more. In Kinsler's study, the babies stared at the English speakers longer. In other studies, researchers have found that infants are more likely to take a toy offered by someone who speaks the same language as them. Psychologists routinely cite these and other experiments as evidence of our built-in evolutionary preference for our own kind. Infants' more favorable responses to those who use a familiar language show that there can be an inborn tendency to prefer in-group members.
5번.
We used to think that the brain never changed, but according to the neuroscientist Richard Davidson, we now know that this is not true. Specific brain circuits grow stronger through regular practice. He explains, well-being is fundamentally no different than learning to play the cello. If one practices the skills of well-being, one will get better at it. What this means is that you can actually train your brain to become more grateful, relaxed, or confident by repeating experiences that evoke gratitude, relaxation, or confidence. Your brain is shaped by the thoughts you repeat. The more neurons fire as they are activated by repeated thoughts and activities, the faster they develop into neural pathways, which cause lasting changes in the brain. Or in the words of Donald Hebb, neurons that fire together wire together. This is such an encouraging premise. Bottom line, we can intentionally create the habits for the brain to be happier.
6번.
The reduction of minerals in our food is the result of using pesticides and fertilizers that kill off beneficial bacteria, earthworms, and bugs in the soil that create many of the essential nutrients in the first place and prevent the uptake of nutrients into the plant. Fertilizing crops with nitrogen and potassium has led to declines in magnesium, zinc, iron and iodine. For example, there has been on average about a 30% decline in the magnesium content of wheat. This is partly due to potassium being a blocker against magnesium absorption by plants. Lower magnesium levels in soil also occur with acidic soils, and around 70% of the farmland on Earth is now acidic. Thus, the overall characteristics of soil determine the accumulation of minerals in plants. Indeed, nowadays our soil is less healthy and so are the plants grown on it.
7번.
For species approaching extinction, zoos can act as a last chance for survival. Recovery programs are established to coordinate the efforts of field conservationists and wildlife authorities, as populations of those species diminish. It is not unusual for zoos to start captive breeding programs. Captive breeding acts to protect against extinction. In some cases, captive-bred individuals may be released back into the wild, supplementing wild populations. This is most successful in situations where individuals are at greatest threat during a particular life stage. For example, turtle eggs may be removed from high-risk locations until after they hatch. This may increase the number of turtles that survive to adulthood. Crocodile programs have also been successful in protecting eggs and hatchlings, releasing hatchlings once they are better equipped to protect themselves.
8번.
Internet activist Eli Pariser noticed how online search algorithms encourage our human tendency to grab hold of everything that confirms the beliefs we already hold, while quietly ignoring information that doesn't match those beliefs. We set up a so-called filter bubble around ourselves, where we are constantly exposed only to that material that we agree with. We are never challenged, never giving ourselves the opportunity to acknowledge the existence of diversity and difference. In the best case, we become naive and sheltered, and in the worst, we become radicalized, with extreme views, unable to imagine life outside our particular bubble. The results are disastrous intellectual isolation and the real distortion that comes with believing that the little world we create for ourselves is the world.
9번.
There is often a lot of uncertainty in the realm of science, which the general public finds uncomfortable. They don't want informed guesses, they want certainties that make their lives easier. And science is often unequipped to meet these demands. In particular, the human body is fantastically complex, and some scientific answers can never be provided in black or white terms. All this is why the media tends to oversimplify scientific research when presenting it to the public. In their eyes, they're just giving people what they want, as opposed to offering more accurate but complex information that very few people will read or understand. A perfect example of this is how people want definitive answers as to which foods are good and bad. Scientifically speaking, there are no good and bad foods. Rather, food quality exists on a continuum, meaning that some foods are better than others when it comes to general health and well-being.
10번.
Many people take the common sense view that color is an objective property of things, or of the light that bounces off them. They say a tree's leaves are green because they reflect green light, a greenness that is just as real as the leaves. Others argue that color doesn't inhabit the physical world at all, but exists only in the eye or mind of the viewer. They maintain that if a tree fell in a forest, and no one was there to see it, its leaves would be colorless and so would everything else. They say there is no such thing as color, there are only the people who see it. Both positions are, in a way, correct. Color is objective and subjective, the place, as Paul Cézanne put it, where our brain and the universe meet. Color is created when light from the world is registered by the eyes and interpreted by the brain.